Hey guys, hope everyone's doing really well today or tonight. I want to make a quick video on the importance of compounding. Now, in the finance world, a lot of people talk about making money quick and how easy it is. If you invest in the right stocks or the right crypto or this new scheme, how easy it is to make money. But the most reliable way that we've seen wealth being generated over 10 20, 50, 100 years um, is all through compounding returns. Now, a lot of people are now starting to realize this, and they're starting to talk about the importance of compounding returns. But I wanted to make it really easy for those who don't know much about the importance of compounding, and kind of communicate that with you guys. Now, I personally, even though I've only been investing for around 8 years, I've realized the importance of compounding, and it's definitely made a difference in my portfolio. And as we'll get into, the longer you invest and the longer you let those returns compound, the bigger the snowball will get, and the more you're going to end up generating. So let's get into it now. So now, look, small wins and consistency will equal massive success. Now, I follow this philosophy for everything in life. I think it can be applied to anything. It doesn't just have to be finance. It could be applied to doing well at your job. Could be family. It could be losing weight, fitness, whatever it is. Being able to achieve small wins, small incremental improvements over time, and then just do that for the next 5, 10, 20 years, you're going to be absolutely successful. Now, this applies to people like Elon Musk, to Michael Jordan, to any successful person you see. They've implemented this. They've compounded those actions over time to get to where they are now. But in terms of personal finance, compounding returns really exponentially increases wealth over time. Now, for example, if you invest $5 today, it's not really going to do much. If you invest $5 for a week, it might not do much. If you start investing it for 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, you'll start to slowly notice that the percent gains that you achieve, year on year or month on month, they start gaining on top of each other. And then instead of a graph like this, it goes more like this and just goes straight up because you're letting time compound those returns. Now, I will say that delayed gratification is key here. This is the essentially the principle behind why compounding interest is so powerful, because delayed gratification means that you're able to let compounding do its thing, leave it to it, and just let it ride, and grow over time. Instant gratification will ruin this, and that's just wanting quick wins and taking from um, you know interrupting that compounding cycle doing its thing. Now, we've all heard that investing your daily $5 coffee will make you a millionaire over the long run, and that's exactly what compound interest is. Now, I'm not saying you have to get rid of your $5 coffees to invest instead, but there's definitely something to be said here on the importance of really small things that don't mean a lot to us at the time, making a massive difference over the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years of our lives. And that's why a lot of people contest having a $5 coffee, because for most people that money can easily be invested and put you in a really good place for retirement. But a lot of people don't want to do this, and instead purchase coffee. um, and look, for me, personally, I still have my coffees. I still enjoy a really great life, but small adjustments, for example, cutting costs where I can, not going out to eat as much, for example, or not having a car, investing consistently and more as much as I possibly can, or even something simple like finding a cheaper platform. If you're currently investing in through a bigger bank or through a bigger platform that charges really high fees to invest, if you can instead find smaller platforms that are still reputable but maybe don't charge you as much, small little things like this over time will compound. So not only will cutting costs mean that you can invest more, but also not having as many fees taken out also compounds as well. So really, really important here. Now, a really interesting point here is reducing invisible costs. So things like taxes and investing fees, right? Now, these are things that we don't see as often. We might see the growth of a certain asset that we're investing in, but all the fees around it. For example, it could be the management fee for some type of index fund. It could be property fees. It could be property tax. It could just be general taxes in your own personal life. A lot of these things we don't actually see the impact of them because they're kind of taken out, and then we only look at the number of the growth number. But if you actually look at what your expenses are, I think you'd be quite surprised. I mean, taxes make up a significant portion of my life. About 20 to 30% of my total take-home pay, which is quite big. Now, if I'm able to reduce that, I'm able to then put that money back into investing. Instead of my taxes, taking more out of my pocket, they're being put into investments which are growing, exponentially more. So really important. And these small things that not many people consider can add to millions of dollars over time. Now, in my opinion, and you know, generally speaking, we see the biggest returns over the long term. Now, you might say, for example, Bitcoin had a massive run and it made a lot more than many other businesses over a much longer time frame. And you're right, but I think crypto isn't a normal case of investing. It's a little bit of an anomaly, right? So just generally speaking, we do see the biggest returns over the long run. Now, it's okay to exit investments, right? For example, if you've made a substantial quick gain, maybe you've invested in a really good area in Australia and it's grown 40% over the last year. However, if it's being invested in an asset that will always be in demand, for example, real estate in a really good suburb or a tier A suburb in Sydney or Melbourne, the biggest returns are going to be those over the long run. So those ones that you've made a really great gain in, you could potentially sell those and then invest them into other assets. But generally speaking, if you have a good asset, it's always best to hold on to it. Now, the question always comes up of when do you sell? And the reality is, for a good asset that's been reliable and consistently grows, the longer you hold on to it, the more it's going to grow. So hold on to it as long as you need to hold on to it for, but just know that likely it's just going to keep growing and growing, and someone else will be able to take those gains for themselves when you do sell. So I mean, ultimately you can hold for as long as you want, but I'm not sure what good use that would be for you. So me personally, an example that I can share with you guys is that I exited the S&P 500 in the American stock market. So I thought it went up enough, while I was investing through 2018 to 2022. But the thing is, for me, and I put that money to good use. But in one year, in 2024, it ended up going up 25%, which is absolutely massive, and probably was a lot more than what I'd previously made over the same a similar time span. So I thought I made the right choice, but potentially not. I think I've done really well in real estate, but it's hard to get a certain percentage number on it, like an index fund, for example. So, and look, it did really well for me at the time, and it was time to move on. But ultimately, something like the S&P will always just go up. It obviously will have its ups and downs, but the S&P, for example, you're betting on the biggest 500 American businesses, so it's kind of hard to go wrong there. Now, in future years, right, while future years may be less, the small periods of high growth contribute massively. So what I mean by this is that you might only be getting, say, 5% per year over the last 5 years for the S&P 500, right? It might be just trading very slowly, but there's always certain days or a certain period within the whole cycle which makes up a majority of that index fund or that investment's gains. So, for example, you might look at the average over the last 40 years for the S&P, and it might be at 8%. Now, if we took out the best days or the best periods, it might only be 3%, right? But those small periods, right, and it might be only a couple of days, or maybe even one day, but being invested during those times is what makes up the biggest gains. So it's almost in your best interest to just let compounding do its thing. Don't touch it. don't touch your investments, because if you miss those days, you're going to miss a significant portion of growth. Um, and I took out in the S&P, and I put into property. So I've been able to make gains in property, but I might also consider in the future going back into the S&P, just by the fact that I don't want to be missing out on these really key moments, such as 2024, where the index grew 25%. And like I mentioned earlier, instant gratification will significantly reduce any returns you make. So do your best to put systems in place to avoid the temptation of instant gratification. So, for example, one that comes to mind is superannuation. Now, superannuation in Australia is a retirement account, and it's very restrictive in terms of being able to take out money. Now, there are certain ways you can do that, but generally speaking, once it's in there, it's locked until about 60 years of age. And that means if you can, for example, salary sacrifice into an account, it'll be really hard to get that money out. And you're kind of forced to delay gratification and let those compounding returns do its thing, which is really great. And this can work well for people who can't control their money, or they can't control their spending. But any other kind of systems in place, for example, an automatic debit from one of your bank accounts, or maybe you just really invest into learning about delayed gratification and compounding returns, and you end up not wanting to just take any money out, just because of what you've learned and the importance of compounding returns. So whichever works for you, but definitely consider putting a system in place to let compounding do its thing, and so that you don't take out in the short term, and instead let it do its thing over the long run. Now, a couple of tips here I wanted to share with you guys to maximize your compounding returns. Long story short, compounding returns favor time, right? So if you can start investing in assets as soon as possible, that is when you're going to see the biggest gains. You hear a lot of people talking about, if you want to reach $1 million by 60, it ends up being, $10 a day. If you're starting at 20, it ends up being $30 a day if you start at 30, $60 a day if you start at 40, and etc. etc. It gets up to into the hundreds of dollars if you're in your 50s or something crazy like that. So the earlier you start, the less you're going to have to put in to reach the same amount that someone in their 50s, for example, would have to put a lot more towards. And if we're being real, if we live in Australia, or if we live in a Western country, putting in $5 to $10 a day into investing is very reasonable and very possible to do. It's as simple as cooking one meal at home, for example, instead. So the earlier you can invest into assets that are reliable and do well, the sooner you're going to let compounding do its thing. Another key note here is that consistency is key, right? So always work to implement a contribution plan or a system. Like I mentioned earlier, sacrificing some of your income could be really good. But a contribution plan, for example, could be something that you personally put together, where you set aside different bank accounts for money to go into, and that money is then invested, and then you have some spending money instead, right? But any system that works for you, that makes sure that you're consistent in letting compounding returns do its thing, will be really important, because the worst thing to do is break that cycle, you know, and break up that consistency mentally, so you don't actually feel like you want to invest anymore. Don't get into that situation. Just stay very objective and make it a routine thing that you don't even doesn't really affect your personal life, and you almost don't even notice you're doing it. But you check back one day and it's just a massive nest egg worth of money that you've been able to grow. So that's what you want. Something else that not many people mention, but I believe I mentioned earlier in the video, was minimizing fees through those low cost investments or tax advantage accounts, for example, superannuation. So, for example, investing in index funds, or ETFs like the S&P 500 with very low management fees, or something like cryptocurrency where there's no management fees, or something like superannuation where there's a tax advantage to contributing to it. So you get a tax deduction, then you also get taxed at a low rate of 15%. So there's lots of different ways you can address tax and fees and whatnot. Obviously, speak to an accountant if you're not sure the best way to approach it, or there's going to be lots of information online and lots of educational content in terms of how to approach that. Um, Now, a really, really, really big key thing here, and I personally do this every single day, but that's investing into your education on monitoring, growing, and optimizing over time. So always stay invested not only in the market or whatever assets you're investing in, but also investing in the process of investing. So learning how to optimize your investments, learning how to continually grow, to save more, to invest more, to maybe put in systems to automate your investing, make it really easy. Whatever you can do to make it easier or more enjoyable or more obvious how important it is will make your journey a lot easier to compounding those returns and growing wealth over time. So the earlier you can do this, the better. The more consistent you can do this, the better. And the more you're able to learn and educate yourself and enjoy the process, again, the more you're going to be able to grow your wealth. So yeah, hope you guys have found some value in this video. Compounding is very important, and you should definitely start investing as soon as possible into the right assets when you can. So if you guys have any questions, make sure to let me know down below. But otherwise, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.